You want to go downstairs? Pete? You want to go downstairs? Hi Vinyl Community, Elliot here again on a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I'm continuing my contest entries today. Now I'm doing David Newton's Decades contest, where he wanted us to, starting in the 70s, show favorite albums from each decade up to the present. Kind of a daunting task when you get into the 2000s, because my collection tends to center around the 60s, 70s, 60s and 70s mainly, and into the 80s some, and I have some from all decades, but just not as much the later, the more current you get. First, what are we listening to? Tony Montoya's Guitar Factory. And Tony Montoya was a guitarist. I think he did a lot of session work, he did albums, and this is just one of those albums where the current hits are being interpreted by this guitarist. He just did Come Together just before this. This is Chewy Chewy Gum Gum, one he wrote. And let's see, he does George Harrison's Something. He does Bob Dylan's Lay Lady Lay. He does Sugar Sugar, remember the pop hit for the Archies, Bewitched, Tequila, Spinning Wheel. So it's just kind of an interesting little something from, I don't even know what year it was. But don't see a year listed here. For Project 3, Total Sound is the record label. And it's in stereo. Okay, so enough of that. Get straight to it. Start the decade of the 70s. It's supposed to be our favorite albums, but you know, with I think all of us, ask me today and you'll get one answer. Ask me tomorrow or 30 minutes from now and you may well get a different answer. I'll go with, I think it's 1978, Little Feat, Waiting for Columbus. This is one of those great albums. It's a live album with that great artwork that Little Feat was known for. This is such a good album, and it exposed a whole lot of people to Little Feat. Little Feat was this obscure LA band that had put out several albums up to this point, but it wasn't well known. I only know one person that had Little Feat albums before this album, but when this album came out, everybody was so blown away with it. Like myself, went back and picked up the earlier catalog, and I'm so glad I did. It's just a great album. Now this is the Lowell George era, and of course he passed away not too long after this, and the band took a hiatus for a while, and then they continued on. And all eras of Little Feat, I think, are worthy and very, very good. But this is just an album that's just really good. It's got, of course, the classic Willin'. It's got Apolitical Blues, Sailing Shoes, Feet Don't Fail Me Now, Rocket in My Pocket, Triple Face Boogie, a Tripe Face Boogie, excuse me, the classic Dixie Chicken, Spanish Moon, Mercenary Territory. These are all songs from the earlier albums. My favorite from Little Feat, Fat Man in the Bathtub. I love that song. Oh Atlanta, Old Folks Boogie, Down on the Farm. And so that's a really good album. Now, one thing about live albums, 99% of the time, they're not simply board tapes from a show where they just taped it right there and then put it out on an album. Oftentimes they include overdubs. They if they recorded multiple nights, they take sometimes even parts of songs from different nights and put them together and things like this. And this was no exception. They went back and redid some vocals and some guitar parts and things like that. It produced a great album. Waiting for Columbus, Little Feat from the 70s. From the 80s, I'll go with Doc and Merle Watson, Picking the Blues. And this is some great acoustic blues from the iconic guitarist Doc Watson and his extremely talented son, who died much too young, Merle. He does on here Stormy Weather, or they do on here Stormy Weather, Windy and Warm, St. Louis Blues, Freight Train Blues, Blue Ridge Mountain Blues, I'm a Stranger Here, that Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee were so famous for. Just a really good blues album, acoustic blues album from Doc and Merle Watson. They really played a lot of type, different music, all of it acoustic. They played blues, they played folk, they played just acoustic oriented music, whatever you wanted to call it. And this album was strictly their blues work. Now we move into the 90s. No greater, better album in the 1990s than this masterpiece from Lucinda Williams, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. This is just a wonderful, wonderful album. I remember when I was writing reviews for a little local community publication, I reviewed this album and I said it's the best album of the 1990s. I think it came out in 98, maybe, something like that. And it includes the title track, Too Cool to Be Forgotten, Drunken Angel, which is about, I'm not mistaken, Drunken Angel is about the Blaze Foley, the name I was looking for. Drunken Angel is about that singer-songwriter. And let's see, what Lake Charles, great song. Metal Firecracker, Greenville, Still I Long for Your Kiss. Just a great album. Now I had this on CD. It wasn't put on vinyl until very recently. I think it's 2014. And she had a collaborator, somebody she worked with in putting this album together. It took her a long time. It took her several years to put this album together. And his name was Garth, M-O-X-I-E or something like that. But they had a falling out just before they finished this. But I remember I thought he had production credits on the original CD. But I've noticed this is says basic tracks produced by the Twang Trust, which is Steve Earle and Ray Kennedy. So I'm wondering if when they put it in vinyl form, they went back and remastered this and remixed this. Anybody knows anything about that, I'd be interested to hear. And then go into the 2000s, and that's a tough one because that is, of course, the CD era. And I'll have to go with this one. I do not have an album, a vinyl album, but the CD, Drive-By Truckers. And this is Southern Rock Opera, their classic from 2002, I believe. And this is really, really a great concept album that tells the story of the South. I guess you'd say all the contradictions, all the good, bad, and the ugly of the South. It's got on here important songs like Ronnie and Neil, talking about Ronnie Van Zant and Neil Young. Days of Graduation, Dead, Drunk, and Naked, The Southern Thing. There's three great Alabama icons, and one of them isn't even from Alabama. It's got something in here about George Wallace. He was one of the three icons. Zip City, Let There Be Rock. Let's see, Casey's Brother, Shut Up and Get on the Plane. It's kind of follows the Leonard Skinner story, and probably my favorite quote in here on this CD is when talking about being in high school, and they weren't Leonard Skinner fans when they were in high school. They kind of came to him later. but being in high school and how important football was. Bear Bryant's another one of the Alabama icons, and how tough it was to not be this big tough football player. But I think he's talking about having a girlfriend, and girls and everything, and he said an electric guitar is a poor substitute for football. Oh, that was pretty good. But the Drive-By Truckers, very important band, still out there today, and Chester Says Hey. And their kind of breakthrough concept album. And then the 2010s, I'll go with this very, very important band, Carolina Chocolate Drops, which is it's Donna Got a Rambling Mind, and this is from 2012, put out by the Music Maker Relief Foundation. And this is a group of 3 African American musicians that met in Boone, North Carolina some years prior to this at the Black Banjo Conference. And they put together a string band. They started going to Mebane and seeing Joe Thompson, one of the last African American string band musicians, and learning from him. And they formed this band. And this is just some great music, which illuminates the role African Americans played in the string band music that came up over the years. It totally went against every preconceived notion about what type of music African Americans should be listening to or playing. This is totally different, and it's challenging, and it's just some darn good music, most importantly. And of course, the members were Rhiannon Giddens, who's gone on its very successful solo career, and Justin Robinson. And I don't really know what Justin Robinson's doing these days. And Dom Flemings, a Arizona native, who he is called the American songster these days, put out some very important work himself. He's got a Black Cowboys album he did with the Smithsonian that's been out about a year or two, so really good stuff. But the Carolina Chocolate Drops, shaking things up with acoustic, African American acoustic music. And then David asked for a favorite love song, since February's almost here. And I'll go with a song written by Townes Van Zandt and recorded by many, many people. But in this case, Don Williams and Emmylou Harris recorded If I Needed You. And this is the album especially for you. Don Williams doesn't get nearly enough recognition in the vinyl community. A great, great singer and interpreter. He wrote some of his own stuff, but just a great musician. Quality country music, when it's real easy to put out some junk and call it country. Don, the gentle giant, they call him, is very laid back, and he and Emmylou do a great duet, which I don't know if it went to #1, but it was top 10 country radio hit when they put this out. If I Needed You. And when you're working with a songwriter like Townes Van Zandt, you got some great material. It's hard to mess it up. So that would be my favorite love song. Okay, so that's my entry into the Decades competition from David Newton. And David, I hope you get lots of entries, and Chester does too. He's very excited about all this. I'll just remind everybody, be kind to your neighbor, and everybody is your neighbor.